most hated high schoolers in all of China. Helen, her boyfriend, and 10 of Helen's little minions, including her right-hand wing woman, Coco. These are all international students whose parents are from China, and all of them, for whatever reason, hate Camellia. They drag Camellia out of the car, throw her onto the floor, and they make the next 5 hours a living hell. They throw ice cream on the ground. Clean it up. Use your hands. If she misses a spot, a high-heeled shoe would lift up from the ground and smash into her rib. One of the high schoolers took Camellia's phone and started smashing it into pieces in front of her on the ground, stomping her heels into it. Another girl kicked her in the back of the knees so that she was kneeling in front of them. And Helen laughed. But of course, in the beginning, Helen didn't even lift a finger. She just stood there, arms folded across her chest, literally like Queen of the Flies, instructing her little minions where to beat, where to punch, where to kick. Coco's standing a little bit behind Helen, smoking a cigarette. One of the girls brings over a giant jug of cold water, and Helen nods in approval. They pour it all over Camellia. Her entire hair and body are drenched in cold water, and at this point, the sun has set. In LA, it gets pretty cold at night. It's getting really chilly. But just to give you more context on how miserable this experience is, Helen sees Camellia holding on to herself, shivering. She says, "Someone take off her clothes." For a second, everyone went quiet. It's kind of an odd request. I mean, they never usually went that far. They would just beat people to a pulp, right? But getting them nude, it felt like it was crossing some sort of new barrier. Coco straightened her shoulders and said, "I'll do it." She asked 2 of the other girls to hold Camellia's arms while she was kneeling on the ground, and Coco forced all of her wet clothes off of her. So now Camellia is kneeling in the cold, completely nude, in a public park. So Coco removed the cigarette from her mouth, stared at it, smirked, walked over to naked Camellia, and started burning it all over her chest and her nipples. She would hold it in place, waiting for Camellia to scream or cry, but she would not. One of the girls notices that Helen is losing her patience, and in an effort to prove herself to the queen, she brings out her lighter and suggests they just light Camellia on fire. Helen smiles and nods. They hold Camellia down, who again is not crying, not begging, not groveling at their feet. They try to light her hair on fire, but because these monsters, these people, had just soaked her completely in water, it doesn't work. Helen stared at all the parts of Camellia's chest that were basically burned and mutilated by Coco, but it just wasn't enough. Because now Helen's thinking, she could hide these behind clothes. She could wear clothes to school tomorrow and no one would know. If we can't light her hair on fire, let's just cut it all off. She turns to her boyfriend and asks him to go home to fetch a pair of scissors. He leaves, goes home to fetch a pair of scissors, brings it back. And finally, Helen kneels down, stares at Camellia's face, and she just starts roughly chopping off all her hair, throwing it onto the dirty, sticky, ice cream melted gravel beneath Camellia, and tells her, "Eat it. I'll let you go home if you eat it all." Camellia freezes, still no tears, no begging. She goes to grab a fistful of hair with her hands, but they stop her. And Helen says, "With your mouth. Like a dog." The other girls take that as a cue to smash Camellia's face into the ground, making her eat her own hair along with sand. She's still unclothed, soaking wet, with burn marks, bruises all over her body. And when they're done, they made her drop them all off.